How's it going there, my friend? Today's discussion is going to surround self-defense and being able to protect yourself in the event of anything that might happen. And I guess I'm going to pose a couple questions about how others feel about self-protection and defense. I'm a peaceful person. At least I call myself a peaceful person. I have no ill intent. I would never harm anyone or take advantage of another person. However, I'm aware that those people exist. Therefore, no matter how kind I am, no matter how passive and peaceful I am, I still have to be able to protect myself against those who are not that way. This often comes down to the discussion about firearms. When people say, well, we should ban firearms, and others say, well, others who have ill intent will always find a way to get them. Therefore, we should have the right to protect ourselves. It's interesting how different people view firearms and firearm safety. We see a couple of media stories about some, mass shooting or somebody who got hurt, or the crime rates that are up so high, which is true. In Portland, they've doubled, but it's still about the same as 1994. And really, I'm still not afraid to walk down the street and get shot or anything. It's not a big concern. However, I don't really believe carrying a firearm everywhere with me is the best option. But I will say that I do carry a knife. I carry a knife in a sheath, and I also often carry brass knuckles. And it's funny because people may think of me as the last kind of person who would carry brass knuckles. And my hope is that I never ever have to use these things. It's just something to slip in your back pocket. And some places these are illegal. Same with switchblades, things like that. But these are just basic tools you can carry in your pocket to defend yourself without having to worry about having a permanently maiming firearm on you. But in some areas, I would definitely carry a firearm as well. I'm not here to tell other people what to carry or what not to carry, or how to protect yourself or not protect yourself. But I have noticed that there's a generation of passivity in the U.S. Because we haven't faced any major personal, let's just say we don't have any personal threats. Our fear is bigger. We're always afraid of terrorism, or something that's coming from the outside, rather than the potential for a neighbor who could overnight just turn on you because they're hungry. Something happens. Say a catastrophe. You may get along well with all the people in your neighborhood, but they might eat you when things get bad. I'm just saying. But it's not even that potential for chaos, which is a major reason why I think having, protection is a good thing. But really that day-to-day situation that we face, where our properties are constantly being cased in... What, Luce? What do you see? They're being constantly cased, and people are looking to take advantage of our property, things that we've earned. It's kind of funny. I understand why people have such a grievance against those who talk about socialism, or the idea of communism, because those who have worked for the things that they have don't want to give them up just because somebody says, well, everything should be fair or be even. Of course, that's not the reality of how most people think. But Luce, come here. But I don't. I do believe in private property, and it's just how things are. You can't get away from it. I mean, yes, there are people who will come into your driveway and steal your car, as happened to me last week. But even worse than that, there are people who will come and kick in your front door. I have seen way too many stories of people who end up having some strangers show up at their door. Maybe they mistake them for someone else. Maybe they think you're a drug dealer, or you have a bunch of money. Even me just making YouTube videos. If I show my yard or something I have, let's say on YouTube, I mean, strangers watch my channel, so do my neighbors, so do probably people who recognize me. Oh, wow, he's got a nice stereo or a nice guitar, It's not likely, but it's possible. And because of that, everybody should be aware. Everybody should be cautious and protect themselves in their environment. Think of it as like in karate. or, Taekwondo, any martial arts. Most martial arts teach you to be spatially aware. And being spatially aware means you walk into a room. For some people, it means seeing everything in that room at once. It can mean knowing where the weapons are. As a lot of people, you'll see that in a lot of movies that deal with martial arts, like walking in and seeing which sticks can be used for what, I don't want to think like that. I don't want to walk into a room and think, how am I going to kill someone if I have to? But I do want to walk in and be spatially aware of what's going on around me. Who's there? What kind of people are they? Well, I just paused the camera for about 10 minutes as my dog jumped the fence into my neighbor's yard and ran loose, and I had to go hunt her down. That was fun. Yeah, so maybe that's a good example. Maybe it was meant to be. Maybe it's part of the discussion. Having a dog can be a great protector. A dog can be, historically, as service animals, they have done many different things. But being a guard dog is a phenomenal thing because dogs can hear things humans can't. They can protect their owner, especially in places where you need a companion, but you don't want to have a deadly weapon. But there's kind of a balance there as to training your dog to be a protector also means that they will have not necessarily a bad attitude, but they will always be on the lookout and always be suspicious. They tend to be, at that point, working dogs, defense dogs. But you can have a happy medium. I think a smart dog will protect its owner while at the same time just being a good companion. And I don't think a dog necessarily needs training to know to protect its owner, but some dogs are just too friendly and they won't do anything. There's a lot of tests of how dogs will handle it. If people, strangers break into someone's house, they do an example to see what the dogs will do. And most dogs just don't do anything. They'll bark, but then they won't actually attack. But sometimes barking can be a deterrent, and that can be enough. Just like sometimes just making a point can be a deterrent. Sometimes pulling a gun can be a deterrent. Like, I'm always impressed when I see people who have home invaders, and you see the surveillance camera of these guys going into somebody's house, and you just see them all running out with the guy holding a gun, not shooting. It would take a lot of restraint for me not to pump somebody full of holes if I was able to, and they were in my home threatening my family in any way, shape, or form. And that's just the thing. You don't know the intentions of someone in your home. It's one of the most invasive things. Fortunately, I mean, I've been stolen from, I've been robbed, but it was people I knew, and it was pretty minor. I've never actually had my home broken into and rummaged through. And that's something I can't even imagine happening. And if my wife was home and I wasn't, or my kids were here and I wasn't, there would be hell to pay. The justice system doesn't do enough. These people go in and they come out the next day. If a person were in my driveway stealing my car and I caught them in the act and pinned them to the ground, if I hurt them, I could get in trouble. And if I just held them for the cops might come and arrest them. Then they'd need the evidence. Even if I had surveillance footage, then I've made an enemy out of the person, right? Because they're going to get out the next day with the court date. There's not enough room in the jails. And it's something that's difficult to navigate. I'm not sure what to do about it. I've always been an aggro hippie, if you want to call me that. I'm not an aggressive person, but when you piss me off, I can really come down hard on people, and I'm not talking physical violence, but I could if I needed to. The only time I've ever been in a real physical altercation that was serious was when I was, in 8th grade, and this guy had been picking on me the whole year before, and I just remember he said something the first week of school, and then we just started swinging, and I focused my blows well, and I wouldn't say I was taking my anger out on him, but he had earned it, I guess. But I still felt shitty later, and we became friends. I don't want to hurt people. It's like the last thing on earth I want to do is harm someone. Yet I still like watching instant karma videos of people, let's say, getting hurt, doing something stupid that's harmful to others. if somebody gets hurt doing something that's dangerous to others, or if somebody, gets instant karma for putting others in danger, it's kind of hard for me not to kind of laugh at that. And the other day, a news article that I was reading about a guy who was crushed to death when he was stealing a catalytic converter because he didn't have the car jacked up properly. So these people got to work, they got to the car lot, and this has happened a lot. They got to the car lot where they worked, and they noticed there were some legs sticking out from under the car. So he had been there for several hours, and he was dead. And your first thought is, yeah, he shouldn't be stealing stuff. Then you read the story, and you find out that he was a father of three, a married father of three, who had hit some really hard times. And he'd been talking with his family and friends about this for like the last several months. Like, say, I'm going to steal like a catalytic converter so I can get caught up on this bill. And they're like, don't do it. It's dangerous and it's bad and you'll go to jail. He had no record. He wasn't a criminal. He'd never done anything bad. He just thought, I'll go to this car lot and get this thing and make myself a few bucks, which probably would have been covered by insurance anyway. It wasn't, I don't even think it was an individual's car. And he got crushed. And it was the most horrific thing. One mistake. But for the guy who does this every day, it's really hard to have sympathy, especially when you're stealing from other people's driveways. When I went to get my dog from the neighbor's yard, I was just telling her about my car being stolen for the second time, and she wasn't aware. And I told her about the guy in the hoodie. And she said, well, about 2 a.m. a while back, I seen this guy in the street, a tall, thin guy with a hoodie, and he was going up to the neighbor's house and toward their backyard. And she's like, I just thought maybe he lived there. And I was like, that might have been the guy. And they actually had their catalytic converter stolen that night. So maybe not that night, but that same week. And 2 nights after I had mine stolen. It makes me want to go out and patrol my neighborhood, but that puts me in danger. But I feel like it's necessary to protect each other and protect our assets. But then the big question arises here. Is stuff really worth dying over, or getting hurt, or hurting anyone else over? I don't have the answer to that question. I feel like if there aren't any repercussions, people just continue to abuse others. For example, you might not think it's harmful to take a car. You might not think it's worth beating somebody to a pulp for stealing a car. But if somebody stole somebody's car that they needed to get to work, and because of that they couldn't get to work, and then they lost their job, and then they had to buy a new car, and then it put them out on the streets, you can ruin a person's life over something that small. If so, you get what's coming to you, right? Whatever is coming to you. And I don't believe in justice through the, quote, justice system. It's just non-conducive to the way I see business should be done. I think people need to take things into their own hands. You might call that the Wild West, but I call it just being honest. Just being honest. If people, I've heard criminals that are interviewed, people who break into people's houses, things like that, and when they're asked, what is the biggest fear you have, or what makes you, more reluctant to rob somebody, and they said, the fact that anybody I'm robbing could have a gun themselves. And that's what scares the shit out of thieves. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, but it is true. Nobody's scared of your mace or your phone so you can call 911. That doesn't always help. And, that's why I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that it's extremely important that Americans, at least in today's world, are able to obtain firearms. It's not just a conservative thing. It's a liberal thing as well. Even felons for nonviolent crimes should be allowed to own firearms, because as any felon knows, you're not supposed to have one, which I think is ridiculous if you've never harmed anyone. If you're a violent felon, that's a different story. So anyway, those are my thoughts on self-defense. I think that learning a martial art can be very useful, but even that can be like a deadly weapon. You have to learn how to control it. But I wish I had. I always wanted to, and I still can, I guess. But being aware of your surroundings and protecting your assets with car alarms, things like that, locking your house at night, even having a home alarm is a good thing. But you can even set up old-fashioned fishing line traps with bells, things like that. I mean, and just deterrence. You know what I mean? Because People won't think twice to take what you've got, and if you catch them in the act, they won't probably think twice to knock you flat and take it anyway. It reminds me of a story I'll tell you really briefly. It was a perfect story, and I just heard it recently. I'd heard it years ago, but I think this was back in the 70s. It's a small town, only a few hundred people. There was a guy in that town that was horrible. He would steal from people. He'd literally go up to their house and just take something, and if they confronted him, he'd say, "What are you going to do about it?" And if they gave him any trouble, he'd just come back with a shotgun. I mean, and scare him to half to death. You know, he hadn't killed anyone necessarily, but he'd beat the shit out of people. Nobody ever did anything about it. This went on for years. He even dated some underage girl, and the family was pissed, but he threatened to kill them all, so there was nothing they could do. They actually agreed to let him marry their daughter, underage daughter. Turned into this whole, years-long thing where the whole city, the whole town hated the guy, and he'd go in and he'd steal things. He'd do whatever, basically anything he wanted. So one day the townspeople got together and they said, "What are we going to do about this?" So they found out he was down at a bar. He'd been harassing somebody, and so they all the citizens got their guns. They all went down. Most of them stood around outside the bar. And a group of armed men went in, walked up behind him. He kind of turned and he was surprised, and they basically told him to get the fuck out, something to that effect. And he got angry and he was huffing and puffing, but he realized these people were serious, and so he walked out of the bar, looked around and realized here's half the town standing there with guns. And he just huffs and grovels and says whatever he says, and he walks over and he gets into his car like he's going to leave, and all of a sudden a shot rings out right through the window, I believe, and just hits him. The townsfolk proceed to walk up, surround the car, and empty all of their ammunition into this car. Shot the guy completely, just annihilated the guy in his automobile, and then they all just went home. Cops came to deal with the situation. They asked for witnesses. Every single person said, "I don't know who shot him. I don't know what happened." But knowing the guy was a piece of shit, nothing was ever done about it. No one was ever charged. And that went down as a lesson to not be that guy. That you can't be the guy who controls an entire town and threatens people and intimidates others. People who intimidate and threaten others are some of the shittiest people, and they always get theirs in the end. I don't like abusers, obviously, so that's just one of my things. I don't like people who take advantage of others. Hands down. So if you come around stealing my shit, you're going to get what's coming. And hopefully others feel the same about their own property, protecting their family. For me, assets aren't the main concern. I want to protect my family, my wife and kids. I don't want them getting caught up in somebody else's bullshit. So, yeah. Be aware, use your head, look around, and I'll talk to you all next time. Quick thanks to my patrons. If you want to support the channel, visit me on Patreon. I've got extra videos. I've been posting some links to unlisted videos on there, and I'll continue to do so, and I'll talk to you next time. Be well.